this way before. Travel through the open door. Circumstances navigated the path, and life happened all so fast. No, we got lonely. Sometimes you see, I know we couldn't make it. Even when I'm off beat, I still land on my feet, and nothing can shake me, cause I know my tomorrow. I never. This is where I am destined to be. I'm not ready to give up. I believe in the miracle of life. Life's a play with no rehearsal. Learn quickly, they'll come for your role. Games to play, can't take it personal. Cause the devil is a liar. I'm telling you the truth. It's all in what you do. Some things you gotta do. Fight for meal, take the second, see the blessing in it. But much expected, much is given. When I made the living, now I'm giving back to children. Never let the power come first before your happiness. Yes, you can be the best if you go the distance. Mix a little sweat with your persistence. You know that the best things are never instant. Just shine, let them see your brilliance. Get up, open up your eyes now. It's the moment of truth. No backing down. We're bringing it to life. Oh, for the children, it's a given. You gotta give it, be a blessing.
This my personal statement. Run the game like I'm aces. Learn to develop patience, determined to be the greatest. Yeah, bobbing and weaving, they changing up like the seasons. Indigenous to the grind, so I do it for all my people. Jabbing the competition, back up against the ropes. You fighting for recognition. I'm fighting just to promote equality where we lack it. While cancer slowing our road, I'm confident we'll make it. We focus on common goals. Yeah.
Give back, give love, give insult away. Never give up, stand tall to fight another day. 2 toes, 2 feet, I stand on the ground. I'm going back soon and fight this final round. Life's a fight for no rehearsal. Learn quickly, they'll come for your role. Can't get play, can't take it personal. Cause the devil is a liar. Tell you the truth, hey. It's all in what you do, hey. Some things you gotta do, hey.
Hey, what's up, Kev? Macadon, DB, if you want to call in now, that would be super too, man. Because I know you said you got to hit and run, so that's fine too. The guest is ready to rock and roll. I appreciate you coming here. We can end early. You know what I mean? We can do overtime too. It don't matter. I appreciate you, man. Without further ado, man, the author, man, the man of the hour, man, the life and times of Nipsey Hussle, man. Appreciate you, man. The marathon continues. Don't stop. We gonna remix all that, man. Appreciate you coming in here. Can't hear you. Okay, let's try that.
Now, how'd that sound?
Boom.
Good money? All right.
Yeah, now we're good, man. Appreciate you coming in here this early afternoon.
Oh, it's nice. It's a little evening vibes here in NYC, and I was just enjoying that music you were playing. What was that record you played just a while ago?
It's actually I wrote it. I wrote it. I wrote it for a Floyd Mayweather biopic I did on him.
That's amazing, man. I didn't know you. I gotta tap into your musical thing. I'm just catching up here. Just playing catch up right
I'm not much into music. I'm just a creator, man. You know what I'm saying? Whatever comes to me. I was with Master P for a handful of years, and
for real?
Oh yeah, I trained Romeo for about 3 years.
Train him in the basketball side? Okay.
In basketball.
Yeah.
and in turn, I became like his life coach. You know what I'm saying? Where because he was always traveling, he had a handful of kids, and he was out making money, and he was transitioning, redefining himself when he was at
Right.
UT at Beverly Hills High School, and
That's amazing, man. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Well, I don't know how deep you got into the book, The Marathon Don't Stop, but I had a chance to speak with Master P
uh-huh,
when I was putting it together, and his voice comes up actually late in the book. But you know, he was a part of Nip's whole inspiration. I'm sure you know, just like the independent movement that No Limit built was such a wake up call. You know, at a time when the rap industry was dominated by major labels. You know,
right,
like there was a moment there where, you know, hip hop went from underground to suddenly dominating, you know, that time when like Interscope was rocking with, you know, Death Row and then Bad Boy at Arista, and, you know, suddenly you had this movement coming out of New Orleans. Like, where did this come from? This make him say, like, you know, like everybody had to just like do a double take and you know, respect the movement out of the New Orleans, you know, and then of course Cash Money right behind Master P, you know, they just like changed the game.
right,
And you know, you know on the record where Nipsey refers to All Money In as the No Limit of the West,
yeah,
you know, but there was a lot behind that statement. You know, that wasn't just like showing his admiration. Like Nipsey Hussle was someone who was very willing to learn from anybody, right? And he was also constantly teaching and educating everyone around him who would bother to listen and soak up the game, right? So he made sure to have Percy Miller read all the contracts that he signed. Like you know, Master P actually reviewed the paperwork for the Atlantic deal, for instance. You know, a lot of people don't realize like how deep the connection went, and even up until just a couple of days before March 31st, you know, Master P and Nip were in the lab working on a record for one of Master P's movie soundtracks. So, you know, they were very close. That's amazing. I didn't realize that you had that connection
oh,
to P.
yeah. When is that remix coming out? Because I know don't rap niggas have a remix to it, and P is on it. If I'm not mistaken?
There's a couple of versions of it. I don't know if it's ever coming out. It was teased.
Yeah,
And Boozy is on it too. There's a crazy Boozy verse that I don't know. Is that on the internet? How did I hear that? There's a couple things I had the opportunity to listen to. Oh, I know what it was. There was a live stream that Mike and Keys did where they were just like pulling up old files on their hard drives, and they played that, man, Boozy's Keys verse. But I have heard that he laid one as well, and I don't know what the plans are with that, man. That's one of those for the X Files. I would love to hear that come out into the world, you know.
how many albums left you think are in Nipsey?
Like of unreleased
Yeah,
material.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know that he was a very efficient artist, so he was not. From speaking with folks like Rallo, like there are verses here and there, but he didn't have like tons and tons of material left on the cutting room floor. There were some early like versions of tracks that him and Meek worked on. There's a collab with Cardi B, which was taken off of Victory Lap. You might have heard, you know, there was some really interesting conversations that Nipsey had with Puff when he, you know, had the chance to like play the whole project for him at a crucial stage of paring it down. And you know, there were certain tracks. I don't know if Puff told him to leave the Cardi track off there, but in general, I think Nip took the approach that he wanted a cohesive body of work. He didn't want to just include something because he knew it was going to be like a huge hit, you know. And obviously at that moment, anything with Cardi B on it still is out of here, right? But he decided this is not totally in keeping with the vision of my debut album, And so I'm just gonna keep that Cardi B joint tucked for another day. There's a song with Future, if I'm not mistaken, that I've read about. I haven't had a chance to hear that. And then there are things, just unreleased gems from early days. Jay Stone has quite a few.
Sure he does.
And, of course, like Pac-Man recently put out that Zero Tolerance is crazy. I don't know if you had a chance to check that one out. Yeah, that is an amazing record. So there's definitely some beautiful music that's still to be released, but it's not the situation like with Pac where he was literally just like stacking vocals, rapping over anything. Like he wasn't that kind of person. Like Pac, I've seen Pac say in interviews, actually during the Death Row cover story that Kevin Powell wrote, which I edited at Vibe, he interviewed Pac while he was laying down music for what would later become, some of the, All Eyes on Me and those kind of records, that came thereafter. But Pac said, I just want like the simplest beat. I just want to put my vocals down. It's not about like the perfect beat. Just let me get my verses out. And I feel like Nip had almost the opposite approach. Like from everyone that's worked with him, he was such a perfectionist on every aspect of his craft. And very often he would be pulled in multiple directions. He was thinking about the marketing. He was thinking about, the graphics. He was thinking about, obviously, all of his various businesses that he was running. And so when he got into that perfect zone that he was going to really, like, bless the track with bars, it had to be everything exactly right. And that's why stories like the way the Blue Laces Part 2 was laid down is so magical. When you hear that story of how he put the first verse down, and then, the brother that was in the studio with him that night was like, you might want to keep going, Nip. You're in the zone right now. Just do that second verse, and then he did that, and that was so crazy. That was the second verse where he said, they killed Dr. Sebi because he teaching health. I fuck with Rick Ross because he teaching wealth, and then he was like, okay, but I got to go now. And then the same engineer's like, no, man, just one more. You got one more in you. You're in a special place right now. And then that third verse, as we know, it just spilled out of him. And, that's a magical record. That record played on repeat many times, many nights when I was writing this book. And I'm sure it's been a favorite for anybody that loves Nipsey's music. So.
Oh, track 5 was it track 5? Track 6 is definitely one of the classics. Why'd you take an affinity to Nip? Why him? Mm-hmm.
I think just having the opportunity to meet him early in his trajectory. I was at Vibe magazine when he came into the office to present Bullets Ain't Got No Name, and I had never heard of him, but there was something about him in person. Even before he pressed play, you could just feel the magnetism. He just had a crackling personality and intellect, and just the way he addressed the room, his physical appearance, the braids were perfect, the chain, the whole, dress code was impeccable, and the way he proudly repped his neighborhood and, his body of work. I've had the opportunity to meet lots of artists and hear a lot of amazing recordings, but there was just something about the way he walked into that room. And I found out later that he had been on a mission to get his work noticed by Vibe. We had a section called the Next Section in those days, if you remember Vibe magazine. There was like 4 pages in the front of every issue that were dedicated to what we call artists on the verge. So like in the very first issue of Vibe, Mary J. Blige got a page, and then in years to come it was Outkast, Nas, Biggie got that next page before whatever other coverage that we would give to a new artist. So Nipsey had been trying to get in the next section, and I was not aware of this until I started working on the book years later. But he was a little salty from what I was told, that we were not recognizing his brilliance. But as with every other goal that he set for himself, he set very high goals, but even when he didn't achieve them right away, he stuck with it. He persisted. And by God, he found his way into the offices of Vibe in 2009. And that was like a little victory lap in and of itself for him, you know. So he was excited. But then, you know, when he played that track, Dre Jackin' for Beats, that's the one I remember so well, hearing him flowing over the gin and juice. And you know, that's not a beat that you can just mess around with. You need to really come correct on that track. And he did that. And, you know, that was at a moment, 2009, if you remember, it was like ringtone rap. Oh, yeah. You know, was really running the place. You know, it was like, you know, teach me how to Dougie and do the stanky leg and things like that. And that's cool. I'm not throwing shade, and Nip would be the last one to throw shade at any rap artist. But, you know, it was very refreshing to me to hear this hard LA sound, you know, from someone that, you know, I had a strong sense of deja vu because we had done the first cover on Snoop in '93 at Vibe. And I remember, you know, when that Doggy Style record came out, and, you know, so it was exciting. And so that was the reason, and to give you a long answer to a short question, you know, that I gravitated to him musically, and something about his personality. I just knew he was special. And so, you know, I told him that day, you know, we'll give you whatever strength we can, keep doing what you're doing, and I'm going to be listening out. And, you know, I paid attention as he did things like, you know, the marathon, the Crenshaw tape. Obviously, that was a huge, huge impact. And there's a funny story around that. You know, I was at Complex by that time. You know, Vibe had folded, and soon after we did the story on Nip, you know, 2009 was the last year that Vibe published in print, you know. Then there was like a renaissance for a couple issues, but basically, you know, around the time of Michael Jackson's passing, that was also the end of Vibe. And so, you know, I moved on, and I was at Complex, and they're kind of known for these funny lists. You know, there's a lot of like top 10 underachieving rappers was the one that Nipsey was included on. And, you know, he was not amused by that, and, you know, he didn't say anything at the time. And for the record, I did not work on that list. I was doing other stuff at Complex. But, you know, some people that I know put that list together, and, you know, he wasn't very amused with it. But he was cool. He was minding his business, but he took notice. And then where he got a little irritated was when he dropped the Crenshaw tape. You know, they made 100,000 one night. Hey. You know, Jay-Z wired the 10K, got his 100 CDs, put it in the Life and Times blog, new rules. Suddenly everybody's a believer, right? So one of my colleagues at Complex reached out to the email address in Nipsey's Twitter bio, and this guy, you know, he's a cool guy, Angel Diaz, real fan of Nip's work. Again, when you're part of a big media organization, sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, right? So right. He writes an email, Nipsey, I'm a big fan of your work. I'd love to, you know, interview you about this Crenshaw project. Man, you probably remember the tweet, right? Fuck Complex. Yeah. Yeah. Fuck Complex, man. Yeah. 10 racks for an interview, or stop contacting my management, you know? And you can imagine, like, at an office when something like that happens. I mean, Complex had been fucking with Nipsey for a while. In fairness, like, there were, you know, a lot of articles covering his rise, but I think they made the wrong move with that underachieving rappers list, because they didn't really recognize all the real things that were going on in Nipsey's life, and the movement that he was building, the independent movement, and taking control of his own destiny and everything. So that takes time, and you can't just be rushing out product and comparing an artist like Nipsey to these microwave artists that just pop things in the oven and pop them out on schedule, you know. So Nipsey had a lot to get off his chest, and so my role at that moment at Complex, you know, I was like a special projects features editor kind of guy, and I I huddled up with some of the guys in the music department. And I said, look, man, just let him talk his shit. Like, don't try to, you know, like walk on eggshells. Just let him speak and print it, whatever he has to say. And that interview is a classic because, you know, I think Nip is generally very calculated and thoughtful in interviews, and he was in this too, but he was so heated. I think he spoke more of his truth that day maybe than in some other interviews. Like if you type in Google complex Nipsey Hussle, it's the first thing that comes up. And, you know, he was speaking about basically the same thing he articulated on the first single off of Victory Lap. He's like, I ain't nothing like you rap dudes, you know, like you can't compare me to industry people because I'm not of the industry. I'm a real person that came up in a real situation, and you just can't compare these things. And he was also speaking to the way the media was starting to become kind of homogenized and a little hipsterish. You know, to me, I think like for someone that came up from the early days at Vibe, at a time when you had to be able to see the artist after your story came out. You know, you had to be able to, you know, the things you wrote should be things that you could say in someone's presence.
Right.
It's not that slick comments in the YouTube and you know, talking crazy under them IG pictures like Jay-Z said, you know. So, you know, it's necessary to be able to speak with respect and be accountable for your words, and that's the tradition that I came up in. And I think as the internet age went on, I think the media, it got into that kind of trolling thing and that kind of, you know, clickbait thing. And, you know, basically it's not a healthy discourse anymore. It becomes, it's no longer out of a place of love and respect, and it becomes more like shock value and hype. And so anyway, you know, I went on and I was at Mass Appeal when the Victory Lap project rolled out. Of course, Mass Appeal's owned by Nas and record labels, so it's more of like an artist-driven vibe there. And you know, we did some cool stuff at Mass Appeal. But when I did the interview with Nip, first of all, I was the person on staff going, we have to get Nipsey Hussle in here to talk about his new album. Don't overcomplicate it. Just let him in here. Let's give him as much time as he needs and just let him drop gems, and it will be great. And everybody had like different concepts. Maybe we can do something on social. Maybe we can do, you know, a film or whatever. And I was like, okay, but just let him talk, man. He's really good at just conversation, and people will hang on his every word. And sure enough, you know, we spoke for over an hour that day, and it was really, from what I understand, it was like his first New York interview of the Victory Lap press run. He came through at like 9:30 a.m., which is the earliest any rapper has ever booked an appointment. And he was 10 minutes early, you know, even though the crew at Mass Appeal was like, is he really going to be on time? You know, because they had to get there and set up the lights and have the gear ready. So they were a little like skeptical, like, really, 9:30? But yeah, he was right on, you know, early, because his rollout was serious. Like, he was so focused on that Victory Lap. I mean, it took a long time for his major label debut, you know. So he was like, he was serious about that rollout, man. Creating the work is one thing, and rolling it out is its own marathon. So, you know, he was stopped smoking weed. He was like ultra focused, and we had this amazing convo that, you know, it was obvious to me when I walked out of that room that there's no way this was just going to be a 5-minute YouTube video. Like, there's just no way to like do it justice. So, you know, that was really the moment when I realized, okay, I have a responsibility to do a lot more with this interview than just, you know, like I say, do like a quick YouTube flip. So that was really the beginning of what became the Marathon Don't Stop, just realizing, okay, no one has told this man's story properly. He's so important to hip hop, to the music business, to, you know, even just like anyone that wants to uplift and empower themselves and their community, you know, and just as a voice for, justice in our society. So many things he made me think about my thought process differently. And, so that was it. That was, in a nutshell, that was the process of realizing, okay, this has to be done.
What was the process in doing your research on them? Like, what didn't you know that you know now specifically as it pertains to Nip?
So much. I thought that I was pretty well versed, being someone that paid more attention than a lot of people in at least the New York media world. But man, there was so much I had to discover. I think first and foremost, just, as I said, like, New York slept on Nipsey Hussle, right? And the media generally is based in New York. So the media slept on him. And, I think he was comfortable with that because he never chose to, like, his goal was not to be like the most famous rapper in the world, right? That was never the goal. It was about, elevating his family, his partners, and building a successful business that would change his life and the lives of all the people in his community that, supported him. So, he wasn't tripping off the fame, but it really became clear that, like, people had a half-baked perception of him. Like, those that were aware in the rap world, like, you can go look at the interviews that he did on the major New York, radio, and, like, I think the Breakfast Club was pretty cool, but, like, the Hot 97 interview to me was, like, I just was surprised that, they can sit and be like, yeah, I haven't really sat with any of your projects before this one, like, and I mean, this is someone that's like 10 projects deep at this point, and, so I thought that was just a little bit off-putting or surprising to me, and I'm sure I can only imagine what went through Nip's mind hearing that. But, one of the things I learned was that, people who were aware of him had this, like, general idea that, okay, he's from Slauson and Crenshaw, he's really in the streets, he's really about that life, all of these kinds of cliches. And, when I spoke with him, we were talking about cryptocurrency and science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and East Africa, and, so many, forward-thinking concepts that, I had to really step back and say, okay, who is Nipsey Hussle? Like, what is the perception and the reality? And, that required me to re-educate myself even about street culture in Los Angeles, and understand the history of LA and California. And basically, like, we learned about gangs from movies and rap videos, right? Most people that don't come from LA, that's the perception we get, is just pop culture, gangster stuff. And basically the image is it's a destructive, dangerous force, needless loss of life, and there's a lot of, tragedy for sure. But when you really talk about gangs, like, let's talk about a group like the Spook Hunters. I learned about that when I did my research about the history of LA. That before there were Crips and Bloods, there was a white gang called the Spook Hunters that used to, have the backing of the police force, and they would have a jacket with a caricature of a black person being lynched on the jacket, and these guys were running around intimidating black students on their way to school, or, terrorizing families that, dared to move out of the official black neighborhoods. And, there was a whole redlining policy and, official government policy to limit where black families could live, and so, of course, there was a need for black neighborhoods to have their own defense, and you had groups like the Slausons, who obviously Nip name-checked frequently in his music. He had his crew, the Slauson Boys. He had, Slauson Boy Records was something he was working on before All Money In. And so when you really start to check it out, there's a whole history of what it means to be in a gang in LA. And these are things that, even as someone who was studying hip hop culture, my whole career, that was a whole process of education for me, and to understand what forces Nipsey was dealing with as a young man growing up, and to understand, maybe what his motivation would be to get involved in street life. I mean, he was someone who was brilliant enough to build a computer from parts when he was in high school, but he made the decision to get involved with the Rolling 60s, and it's not because his parents were involved. His father came from East Africa. It wasn't like a legacy situation. This was a choice that he made. So, what was that about? That was one of the things that I tried to really grapple with in the book and show a bigger picture of, what his motivation might have been. So that was a big learning piece for me. And then just meeting people like Dexter Brown, who've been completely left out of the narrative up until now. That was a huge blessing for him to reach out to me. I mean, I had never really heard of Dexter Brown. His name is mentioned in the credits of the Crenshaw tape, and there's one or two interviews where Nipsey mentions him, but he played a huge role in the early stages of Nip as an artist. Basically, created a safe haven for him to come and live at a time when he was no longer living at home. He'd been asked to leave high school. His parents were not comfortable with the choices he was making, so he wasn't, living at home anymore. He could stay at his grandma's sometimes, but, he was basically surviving by his wits and hustling. And Dexter was a photographer, a black civil engineer, successful homeowner with a family who opened his doors and brought, people like Cuzzy Capone, Gucciavelli, of course, Rallo and Nip into his house. Actually, Nip wasn't even called Nipsey Hussle before he came to Dexter's. He was Ermias Ascadome, or Ermi. He would rap under the name Concept sometimes, and all of that magic took place in Dexter's house, so to tell that story and to have the testimony of all the people that, shared their memories with me about those early years, that was very special, and it's a real privilege and a responsibility for me as a journalist just to get that right and tell the story of a young man, not a rap star, but a young man, coming up in a hard situation.
2009 Nip, and 2017-18 Nip. How do you see that evolution?
Well, he spoke about it himself.
Very clear in his music, yeah, it's very clear, but just on a personal level.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that at the time of 2009 Nip, he was just very determined and excited to make his mark in the rap industry. Bullets Ain't Got No Name, at that point, he was still quietly signed to Epic Records and was planning to release a project called South Central State of Mind, which never came out because he eventually felt that he was on a different page creatively than the label. Some of the key people who had first brought him into the label had exited, as often happens at a major label. You have like rotating A&Rs and execs. So, suddenly he was in this big company, but the people that brought him in weren't there anymore. And so I think from that first meeting where he had a clear idea that he was gonna, put these mixtape out, these, Bullets Ain't Got No Name series, then he was gonna drop South Central State of Mind, then he was gonna start his Slauson Boys Records. Like he was gonna do it like Master P. I think that was the plan, you know, that he was gonna become the No Limit of the West, and you know, put Cuzzy and Jay Stone and Cobby and, you know, his inner circle forward as his own independent wave. He always was a little bit ambivalent about dealing with the major labels, but he had made his decision. He had signed the deal and he was going with it. By the time you get to 2018, you know, that conversation is someone who has made the choice to break away, walk away from, you know, a label that spent over $1 million on his mixtape campaign, and, you know, that had an album finished and ready to go that he just walked away from, found a way somehow through his own personal persuasiveness and also the team around him, Johnny Shipes, Big U, Steve Lobel, you know, he was able to negotiate control of his masters and walk away owning all those records, those amazing records that came out on the Bullets tapes, you know, and I love those albums. You know, they're not all like hardcore gang related street records. There's a lot of very, you know, thought-provoking records in there too. So, you know, creatively he was still evolving, but I think by the time he walks away from that deal, he goes through the process of the marathon. The marathon continues. The Crenshaw breakthrough. You know, he's gone through a change in management. He's consolidated all money in, no money out. He's completely committed to his team and, you know, his independent wave. He does the Mailbox Money record for $1,000 a copy. You know, he's building businesses. He's making, you know, connections with leadership in the city. You know, he's got the Destination Crenshaw thing going with City Councilman Marquise Harris Dawson. You know, he's opened Vector 90. Him and his brother Sam have, you know, bought back the shopping plaza. The Marathon Clothing Smart Store is like the most technologically advanced retail business really at that moment, I would say, in the world. Like, he had done something in his neighborhood where he grew up that's considered, you know, the wrong side of town, or, you know, a scary place to go if you're not from around there. He made it one of the most technologically advanced retail businesses in the world. The NBA store didn't have the stuff that he had yet, you know,
Right.
with the, you know, augmented reality and the apps that you could scan the hang tag on the Crenshaw, like your Crenshaw hoodie. I don't know if when you got that, but, you know, there was a point in time where he had the hang tags with the scannable code. And, you know, when did you get that hoodie? When?
I got it after.
Okay, you got it after. Okay.
He passed, yeah.
So, but, you know, I'm sure you're aware that.
Yeah, you can scan it on your phone and all that. You met the guy like in
Starbucks, Idris Sandu.
Starbucks.
Yeah. Now, Idris Sandu put up a very interesting post the other day, because, you know, he's this, you know, also a young man of African descent, you know, genius level on the coding, someone that has created so much powerful technology, not only for the Marathon clothing, but he's collabed with the likes of, you know, Kanye West and, you know, lots of high level stuff, and doing, I think he was doing like smart self-driving cars for you know, Tesla and Google and all the, you know, he's at that level, a young African brother, and Nipsey just recognized something great in him. But in a recent Instagram post, Idris pointed out that, you know, all this stuff that we're hearing now about cryptocurrency, blockchain, the NFTs, that, you know, just, I mean, actually tonight at midnight, New York time, and 9 o'clock LA time, there's going to be a collab between Mike Dean, the legendary hip hop producer, and Shepard Fairey, the street artist who did like the Andre the Giant Has a Posse, you know, the Obey stuff and the Obama Hope poster. He's two, you know, very major cultural figures, have collabed on an NFT. So it's going on sale tonight. And, you know, we've been seeing these NFTs. I don't know if you've been seeing that in the press, but like
Big
one
money.
of them's, yeah, $69 million auction at Christie's for an Instagram artist. You know, and it's the same concept that Nipsey was talking about. This is the point that Idris Sandu said in his Instagram post. Like, we were on this then.
Right.
And if you were here, Nip, was the basic sentiment. Like, that he just, you know, like so many people, you know, he's thinking, what if Nipsey Hussle was here right now, what would he be doing? And it is no doubt that he would be heavy into all of this crypto and NFT stuff. I mean, David Gross told me, and David Gross is the, you know, the financial wizard that helped Black Sam and Nipsey finance the deal to purchase the shopping plaza, which is on its way to becoming the Nipsey Hussle Tower. And, you know, that process is still ongoing. But David Gross said, you know, Nipsey was always trying to convince me about crypto, and I just didn't see it, or I didn't, you know, something in me was a little reluctant. And like, if I had been, you know, if I had listened to him when he was really pushing me, I would be so far up right now. Because, you know, in 2020, the Bitcoin and all that stuff just went crazy. Because I think this is what was so dope about the way Nipsey explained crypto, is that I think he wasn't alone among hip hop artists, like successful people with money to invest, who recognize, okay, this is something I should try. Like, for some reason, this might make money. But Nipsey really could explain to you why it was going to make money and why it made sense and what the whole basis of currency was, and why, you know, governments and, you know, the treasury are not the only way that, you know, a currency can be valued. And, you know, it really comes down to, like, this piece of paper that we call a $20 bill, you know, we've all decided that it's worth, you know, 2 dime bags, or, you know, a dinner, or whatever the $20 will get you. Right. And, you know, it's only when the government stamps it that it's considered, you know, legal tender. But what about if the tech community that's been communicating around the world, and we've seen government currency fluctuate, we've seen, you know, a lot of unrest in the world, you know, what better time to look at alternative ways to, you know, secure your financial future? And, you know, Nipsey could explain it, and he wanted everybody to understand it too. This is the thing, you know, actually the very last question in my final conversation with him, you know, what I said to him wasn't even a question, but I just said, you know, I appreciate the way that you share your insights with everybody. You know, it seems like you want to let other people follow in your footsteps. You don't just hold things back, you know, and keep them to yourself. And Nipsey's response to me was, you know, I'm not outside handing out bags of money, but the game is free. You know, and when we were young men coming up, that's what we, you know, expected of the older cats. That's all we asked, is just show us the game. You know, you don't have to tell us all your secrets in life, but give us enough of the game that we can figure it out and make our own way. And if you're secure enough in your own ability to hustle, you don't have to worry about giving up some of the game, you know. And if you don't, it's almost like you're hating. It's almost like you're trying to block the blessing. So, you know, that was Nip's MO, is, you know, he would share his knowledge with anybody that was willing to listen, because he was secure in his own ability, his competitive edge. You know, his family was going to be all right. It wasn't going to hurt him. His bag would be secure, and he could also, you know, give a little game. And, you know, that is my intention in writing The Marathon Don't Stop. I want to, you know, carry that forward. You know, Nip's belief that the game should be shared. And, you know, so I've put a lot of work into this book to, you know, put as much of that game down and make it available to people who are curious and want to learn more.
Facts. Taylor Bell has a comment. He says, Fred, Nipsey inspired me to quit my 9 to 5, create my own e-commerce business. I am now my own boss, in control of my own future. Thanks, Fred and Nip.
That's amazing. And there's so many people like him. One of the interviews that struck me the most, a lot of the great interviews were people who reached out to me after it was announced that the book was coming. Like I had my list of people that I was reaching out to in the beginning, but some of the most unexpected things came to me because people were so touched and inspired by him. And there was a young man who went to school across the street from the Marathon clothing store. There was a very high level high school there, where you had to have very good grades to stay in the school. And, a lot of the graduates of that school would go on to have opportunities to work for corporations and, Fortune 500 companies and what have you. But this young man said that him and his friends would see Nipsey standing in the parking lot of the Marathon clothing store, and they knew that, Nip and his brother owned that store. And it gave them so much inspiration just to see two young black men own their own business in that neighborhood, and to have so many people gravitate to that store, and this was, mind you, like even at a time before all the hoopla was coming. And, he said like when he would walk into the store wanting to get that Crenshaw shirt, it was a little scary for him, but that Nipsey would protect customers and make sure no one messed with them and, make them feel at home. And basically his point was, all of my friends from this school are going to try to emulate Nipsey Hussle more so than apply for a job at a big corporation. And, he had started his own business, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other people like was it Taylor that just left the message? Like Taylor, they were inspired by that example just to see what is possible. You don't have to go by the old rules, and you can create a new way for yourself that's probably better for you than the system that was set up. The people that made this system didn't make it for people to prosper, right? They made it to keep us in our spot so that we will do just enough to keep coming back to work again on Monday morning, and it's the same with how he talked about the rap game. When Nipsey was talking about the rules of the rap game, he said, it wasn't artists that made the rules this way. It was business people who they saw, okay, artists love to make art, so they're probably going to do it anyway. And the people love the music so much, they'll do anything to get it. So if we can just put ourselves in between those two, the artists are passionate and they're just going to create and they're going to be famous and they're going to have fans and they're just going to be happy. Just give them the minimum amount of profit to just keep them happy enough that they don't ask questions, and just, and then the fans are going to be beating down the door, and we're going to keep the lion's share of the profits for ourselves. And that's the way the rap game was structured. And that's not only the rap game, it's a lot of other creative industries, and just any business is set up that way, unless you have a really cool, enlightened boss. And they're starting to see now that you have to give your employees equity, and you get more productivity when you treat people with respect and incentivize their work. But the old rules was not set up that way. And so Nipsey saw through that, and he articulated clearly what was wrong with that system. And that's part of my, light bulb moment of talking to him. I just, I thought about my own life differently, in my conversation with him. It was a privilege to speak with this man.
How would you summarize his spiritual compass?
Oh, wow. Well, he believed in God. He had, God will rise tattooed on the side of his temple here. which is actually the literal translation of his name, Ermias. It means God will rise in the language of Tigrina in Eritrea. But his spiritual compass, I believe he was someone who believed that, he said it in many records, I know God got me, and I mean, you can hear a long tradition in hip hop of, like Mobb Deep says, getting closer to God in a tight situation, there is a, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death thing that happens sometimes when you're in difficult situations, and it causes you to reflect on, how did I get through that just then? How did those bullets whiz through the Cadillac and miss me, I had a close one yesterday, as Buju Banton says on one of his records, and I think that is definitely one part of his rock solid belief in God. And the other is, that his family was, so spiritual,
Right.
when you hear his mom and his grandmother, the remarks that they made at the celebration of life, and in other interviews, it's quite amazing to think, people who had only the slightest relationship with their son or grandson, felt that loss so keenly that they still haven't gotten over it years later. And yet the woman who brought him into this world can speak with such grace and calm. It boggles the mind, how she has that kind of spiritual strength to, to carry this pain with such grace, And same with Granny, there's a interview which I quote in the book where some news reporter just showed up on her doorstep, and it was soon after the atrocity of March 31st, and they were asking, so what do you have to say about this person that they've taken into custody? And she said, I pray for him. I pray for him. I don't want to see anything bad happen to him. I mean, that's a special individual who can find that kind of grace at a time like that, So you just have to know that that's who raised Ermias Ascadon, and you'll understand about his spiritual compass.
He mentioned Malcolm X a lot, and many more historical figures. Can you elaborate about the impact of some historical figures in his life, like Black Panthers, Malcolm X, and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure you caught the line on the record, What It Feels Like, the most recent release. Zero Tolerance is more recent.
Yeah.
But yeah, you caught that line where he said, young Malcolm,
yeah,
I'm the leader in this thing, and that's a very telling line, but it didn't surprise me when I heard it. I never heard him say it on a record, but I'm sure most of you Nip fans noticed that iced out Malcolm X pendant that he would have swinging around his neck on many videos and live performances, and that's a piece that actually Black Sam had designed and custom made. And when he was going away to do some time, he gave it to Nip and said, hold on to this for me, and so that piece meant a lot to him. And when he was asked about it in interviews, he said, well, yeah, that's someone whose words mean a lot to me. And if you notice in the book, The Marathon Don't Stop, I actually open it with a quote from the autobiography of Malcolm X, where a young, basically like a shoe shine boy working in a nightclub in Harlem is showing young Detroit Red, which was Malcolm's name before he experienced his epiphany and changed his life. He's showing him the ropes, because Detroit Red is going to take this job, and the quote that it says is, one thing you have to remember is that everything in this life is a hustle. So I think that transformation that we saw from Detroit Red to Malcolm X is something similar to the transformation from, Lil Thundercat, aka Neighborhood Nip, becoming the Nipsey Hussle that we saw, in later years, who, was all about his community and all about, while not turning his back on the street life by any means, he was, changing it from within and trying to motivate his brothers from the 60s and from other neighborhoods in LA, to look at life differently and understand that, the old rules of, how the gangs could, make money and the types of things that they were involved in were just not feasible anymore. That it wasn't possible with security cameras on every building and, cell phone towers that would track your movements. You couldn't just be doing things that used to go on in the hood. So, he was, I believe, Nipsey Hussle had educated himself to the history of the Crips and the Bloods and understood that, before that there was an organization called the Slawsons, who we mentioned earlier in the talk, and the leader of the Slawsons was Bunchy Carter. Al Prentice Bunchy Carter, met some of the founders of the Black Panthers while they were incarcerated together, and they basically said, we need to be working with you. We need to open an LA chapter of the Panthers, and that's what Bunchy did when he was released. And, they made a huge impact in a short time. And then, as we know, the federal government saw the Panthers as a huge threat. They were giving free breakfast and health care to kids, and that was seen as a threat. They did exercise their right to bear arms for self-defense, which I guess was seen as a threat more so than like when Trump supporters show up in the Michigan State Capitol with machine guns, that don't want to wear masks for coronavirus. So it just depends what you perceive as a threat. Back to my earlier thing, like, who's the real gangs? Is it, the Slawsons, or is, what about the Proud Boys that tried to overthrow the government the other day? They're a gang. They're a dangerous gang. One of the founders of the Proud Boys was one of the founders of Vice Media. It's a multi-million-dollar media corporation. So who are the real gangsters, right? So but anyway, Malcolm, Bunchy, these were leaders who came from a struggle and had a moment of clarity and changed their lives and, dedicated themselves to the upliftment of their communities and their families. And, and they ultimately, met with an untimely death, violent, untimely death, in cases that are still highly suspect, that have been explained but not fully clarified. And there's a strong sense that half the story has never been told in those tragic murders. So I'm afraid that Nipsey Hussle's death is going to go into that file of unsolved mysteries as well. That although there is a person in custody who's observed on camera, pulling the trigger, there's a lot of unanswered questions that remain around that. And but there's no question that Nip's image and legacy are strong as they ever were, maybe even stronger in some ways. The more people are paying attention than ever before to his message and his movement. And that's another reason that I wrote the Marathon Don't Stop. I would like to see the work that Nipsey Hussle was doing in his community recognized and celebrated and emulated around the world. And I've had some amazing conversations since the book rolled out on March 23rd. I had an opportunity to speak with someone who's doing work in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, saying that not only is Nipsey's music very popular there, but that, you know, his business practices and his social movements are also being emulated. And, you know, to know that was something that made me very happy, and I'm sure that would do his soul and spirit, you know, justice as well, to know that his example is being emulated, you know, in Africa, a nation, a continent that he, you know, felt such a strong connection to.
You got time for 2 more questions?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What's some of your go-to music with Nip and why? And
yeah, I made a whole playlist of tracks, and I've seen people. One of the things that was really cool with the, you know, the love that people have shown for this book is, you know, I saw one young man made a whole playlist of all the songs which are quoted in the book, which blew my mind. I thought that was awesome that someone had taken the time to pull those songs out. But there's a track called Respect Your Passion, which is not on any album or mixtape. It's just a Lucy that Bink produced. Is one of my favorite producers from the Rockefeller stable. But anyway, Bink did this song, Respect Your Passion, and it's for anybody that's ever, you know, just followed their inner voice, you know, which is what guided Nipsey. And, you know, it's the kind of thing that guides somebody like myself that, you know, nobody ever told me you can, like, fill out a job application to be a hip-hop journalist, you know, but I loved music and I loved writing, and, you know, I was blessed to get down with Quincy Jones's magazine in '92, and, you know, did that job for 17 years, and then one day they folded the magazine, you know, like the bank repossessed it, and they said, stand up and make your way toward the elevator, you know, like put your pencil down and don't touch anything. And, you know, and that literally happened. And I just wanted to finish the article I was working on. We were doing this dope package for Michael Jackson.
Wow.
In memorial, you know, and like Quincy was going to talk to us. It was going to be this amazing tribute to MJ, and we didn't get to finish that, you know, but like that's where my passion was. I wasn't thinking about what's my equity and vibe and, you know, what's my plan B. I didn't have a plan B, you know, but I walked out of that building and had no clue what I was going to do, like truly none, you know, and so, but I followed my passion and, you know, put it back together and found other places to work and to do what I learned at Vibe. And, you know, so listen to the lyrics of that song sometime. It's one that needs to be played more than it is. Scarface requested it when he called in to DJ Drama's show one time when Nip was being interviewed by Drama on Shady 45. The Scarface like, play that Respect Your Passion. And that's how I heard about the song. Listening to Scarface request, I was like, oh, it must be pretty dope. And yeah, he's basically talking about, you know, you make a big plan and watch it all crumble to the ground, you know, and then just rebuild. And, you know, that's the marathon mind state. That's the whole mentality, is like, you know, just, it's not a brick wall, it's a speed bump. We just keep going through that, you know, and don't worry about who else is racing past you at that moment. You've set your pace, you know, and just stick with it, and you will reach your destination. You know, you just don't quit. You know, that's the whole thing. Don't quit. Another one that I love is The Weather, featuring Rick Ross and Cuzzy Capone. Cuzzy's verse on that is amazing. I think Cuzzy is a very underrated talent. Like all of Nip's hand-picked MCs, he's a beast on the mic. But he was an OG to Nip. Like, he actually, when Nip came to Dexter Brown's, Cuzzy was the star. And
he actually taught him, right?
Yeah.
He actually taught him cadence and stuff.
Well, he was rapping. He was already rapping before. Like, so, you know, Cuzzy would probably correct you there. Like, he was Ermias was nice, but they definitely learned about just the street culture of the neighborhood, and they picked up just the way you deliver your rhyme with authority. Like the words that you're saying are backed up by real life things, and Cuzzy was a giant to them at that moment. Rallo and Rimpaw and Ermias came to Dexter's. They looked up to Cuzzy crazy, so he remained a part of all of Nipsey's work, and pops up on mixtapes all the way through, and in the videos, you see him in the Racks in the Middle video, and Cuzzy's an amazing artist, and a great person, and shed a lot of light for me on those early years, and Nipsey's whole journey. So The Weather is a song. When I asked Cuzzy what record he was proudest of, that he mentioned that one, and I think it holds up really well.
Any notable names that said anything about Nip? Like, did you get a chance to interview Rick Ross, Jay-Z? Yeah.
I didn't speak with Jay, but Rick Ross I spoke with, and one of the things that Ross said was just that the thing that broke his heart was to see how comfortable Nip was that day, March 31st, and it made him feel like he totally understood what his mindset was, just how he was chilling in his shorts and just at home, and it was a painful thing for him to think about, and and Ross said he's been through situations where attempts have been made on his life, and he understands that he would like to be as relaxed and at home with his day one people as Nip was that day, but obviously we saw the tragedy that unfolded, but Ross was very generous with his time and speaking with me, and he also spoke at length about wanting to sign Nip to MMG. That was one of the first people he actually wanted to sign, and it just wasn't possible for him, even though he put together a very generous package, and presented terms that probably another artist at that stage that Nip was at would not have been able to get. It just wasn't possible for him to give the full ownership that Nipsey was committed to for himself and his team. And it was a difficult decision for Nip, to not go with MMG at that moment, because they were one of the hottest rap imprints in the game at that time. But it was something that he just knew he had made a commitment to his inner circle, his brothers and his team, that we are not going to accept anything less than our exact terms that we have been working so hard for. So they made a decision not to do that deal, but they stayed real cool, and the respect was obvious. And I know, like, when I put that book in Ross's hand, I could see the look on his face. Wow. he was I can't speak for him, but I think it touched him, and he put it on his Instagram stories, I believe, which is a big endorsement. So, I say much respect to Rick Rose. He's a real one, as real as it gets, and that's why Nip said, I fuck with Rick Ross because he's teaching well. And that meant a lot to Ross to hear that.
How do you capsulate the marathon Don't Stop, the life and times of Nipsey Hussle coming down the stretch? Why should we buy the book? Anything you want to leave with us about Nip, the process, et cetera, et cetera? Take your time and elaborate. They're all yours.
I mean, I would just say, if you can't buy the book right now, go to your library and check it out. If you can find a copy that your friend has, I just want people to soak up the inspiration. Nipsey Hussle said the highest human act is to inspire, and people need inspiration more than ever right now. You know, this is a very challenging time in human history. We've had, you know, the pandemic, we've had this atrocity after atrocity. Every day there's a new person being slaughtered by police. You know, there's been a racial reckoning in the United States of America since, you know, it goes back way before George Floyd, but we saw a new resurgence of this whole, you know, why do we even have to have a conversation about the phrase Black Lives Matter? Why does that even need to be said in 2021? But here we are saying it again. And so, you know, at a time like this when, you know, there's people out there that believe that, you know, Donald Trump actually won the election, that believe that, you know, the Proud Boys really should have like overthrown the government, and, you know, that Mexican people should be demonized and we should build a wall and separate people. And, you know, we need to hear that it is possible to come from a place where people, you know, dismiss the residents of the Crenshaw district. They say nothing good can come of this place. You know, it's gang infested, crime ridden, you know, low education levels and all that kind of stuff. And look what came from that. You know, look at how this young man overcame every adversity, every obstacle, and prospered and brought the whole world to his neighborhood. You know, like he did something that seemed impossible.
Right.
And we all need that kind of inspiration. I think anyone can apply it to their life. And that's why I knew it was so important to write this book. While I was finishing it, I was watching the fires burning across the country. I was watching, you know, the fear and the stress of, you know, having such a racially divisive political administration. And, you know, I mean, obviously we saw the FDT record, the YG and Nip made, played millions of times on election day and helped turn the tide of the election. You know, he's a powerful artist with a powerful message, a powerful movement, and we can all use a little inspiration, plug into that source, and learn more about someone that overcame all the odds. And we're still sitting here talking about him today. And thank you for this time. You've been really one of the best interviews I've done in a while. I appreciate the questions. Yeah, really good questions. And, you know, I hope we can share this with everybody. I want everybody to just know this story. So whether you buy the book or whether you borrow it from the library, or, you know, just find a way to tap into the inspiration. It's very important.
Well, we appreciate your time, man. And I'm looking forward to finishing the book. I'm in between projects. So I'm working on some films right now. And it's I'm dibbly dabbling. You know, you got to do your research and you got to cross reference.
Of course. And I think speed reading is overrated, man. Take your time. You know, take your time with it. It's a marathon, not a sprint, man. It took a long time to write it. I worked on it for like 3 years and really researched it since I met him, damn near, you know. But yeah, it's like 400 plus pages with footnotes and everything. So take your time, you know, reread it, go back, you know, and get what you can out of it. I think that one of the coolest things I've heard, and then I'll leave you with this, but that people have actually started book clubs in Nip's name. You know, Nip was an avid reader.
Here in LA.
Yeah. Nip was such an avid reader, and he was sharing reading lists with his close friends, and always had a bookshelf in his studio. You know, he didn't finish high school, but he educated himself constantly. Never stopped educating himself and everyone around him. And one of my goals for this book was that it would be worthy to be included on one of those reading lists that Nip, you know, would consider important. And that's why I put so much history of LA and history of, you know, just America and the hip hop industry. And so there's a lot in that book that's more than just one man's story. I tried to really place him in context. And, you know, I believe that, you know, that is why people are finding so much in this. And, you know, I had the opportunity to present the book to Howard University faculty not too long ago. And, you know, they're talking about incorporating it into like a new hip hop studies program. So, these are the things that give me inspiration to keep going. And so I appreciate you taking your time. Don't rush. It's a marathon. And the marathon don't stop.
Marathon don't stop. How about a visual with the book? Can you
What you mean?
that?
Oh, will there be you mean like a movie or something?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know that the family is working on a documentary already, so that is happening for sure. And and that is not based on my book, but I mean, if look, a lot of people have said it reads like a movie. It's a very it's an epic tale, and it's shocking that no one had documented his life properly before now. There weren't even decent magazine profiles of Nip apart from the GQ. There's a beautiful GQ piece, California Love, that focuses on his relationship with Lauren London, but there was so much that hadn't been put down. So I mean, it would certainly lend itself well to a movie, and if someone puts the right thing together, that the family's with it, like, I'd be honored to play my position in something like that.
Facts.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time this evening for you, this afternoon.
Yeah.
But
All right.
appreciate you, man. And feel free to come back anytime, please.
Yeah, let's do a part 2 when you all done reading, man.
Done deal. Sure.
All right.
For sure we will.
Okay,
Appreciate
and I understand we're making a donation to the Neighborhood Nip Foundation off of this podcast today.
Yeah, we already did. I think PPP already made the donation, so we're good with that.
That's beautiful, man. I appreciate you doing that, and I've said this before, but just while we're on the topic, a portion of the book proceeds will be donated to the family and to the Neighborhood Nip Foundation because Nip loved hip hop. First love was hip hop, and that's fun to encourage aspiring artists and creatives in the neighborhood. So.
You ain't seen my painting behind me, huh? Have you seen it? Can you see it?
What you got behind you? Oh wow, no, I didn't even see that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You were in front of it the whole time, so I couldn't even. That's crazy, yo.
It was like 125th meets Lawson and Crenshaw.
Who made that?
Keenan Chapman is the artist that painted it for me.
That's beautiful. That's a great piece, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we could do this all night, but I'm going to go get some dinner.
Appreciate you, dog.
Yeah, much respect to you, and thanks for spreading the good word, man. Long live Nipsey Hussle.
Long live Nip. Appreciate you, King.
All right, respect.
All right, peace. All right, man. I appreciate y'all. We coming back. We taking a 4-hour commercial break. We going to be back in 3 hours and 51 minutes, man. And DB ain't here. So, well, you know what I'm about to say? Play the song, Fred. I appreciate everybody coming in here tonight, man. I'm about to go do some homework, change some diapers, do some baths, you know what I mean, and do all that good stuff, man.
Travel
through that open door.
Circumstances never
change the past.
And life happened so fast. No, we got no reason. God, you see, I know we could make it. Even when I'm off beat, I still
appreciate you, Rob. What's up, Akil? Eli, what's up, man? What's up, KJ, Kevin, Poncho? What's up, Jay Gibb? Rob G Films, man. I still land on my feet, man. Hey, I had a moment when we said that shit in the studio. I had a moment when we wrote that. Man, that's the story of many people's lives, man. Gotta land on your feet, SS Caesar. Ant Fresh, man, the biggest Nip fan in the world, man. Cause the devil is a lie. Hey. Telling you the truth, hey. Love is the word, hey. Some things you gotta do, hey, 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 hey. Picasso, what's up, man? What's up, man?
Much expected, much is given. When I made the living, now I'm giving back to children. Never let the power come first before you have happiness. Yes. You can be the best if you go the distance. Mix a little sweat with your persistence. You know that the best things are never instant. Just shine, let us make it brilliant.
Get up, get up. It's the moment of truth. Go back and down. Best things in life are never instant. You got it. You got it. Forgive it. Gotta give it. Be a blessing. Hey yo. It's my personal statement, running game like I'm aces.
Learn to develop patience,
Determined to be the greatest, yeah. Bobbing and weaving and changing up like a season. Indigenous to the grind, so I do it for all my people.
Jabbing the competition, back up against the ropes. You fighting for recognition, I'm fighting just to promote equality where we lack it. While cancer slowing our road, I'm confident we'll make it. We focus on common goals.
Oh, did I say something?
Give love,
Hey.
giving something away. Never give up, stay
Hey.
tall to fight.
Deacon 305, man. What up? What up? What up? What up?
Toes to feet, I stand on the ground. I'm going back soon and fight this final round.
Nice to play with.
Learn quickly, they'll come for your road. Can't take it personal, 'cause the devil is alive. Hey, I'm telling you the truth. Hey, it's all in what you do. Hey,
Things you gotta do. Hey, 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 hey. Appreciate y'all. Love y'all, man. See y'all in 3 hours and 48 minutes, man. Last time. Peace, y'all.